Hi Dan, thanks for joining us once again. Today we're going to talk about how bonsai has affected you and your life, really, your journey through British Bonsai. And so I guess it would be wrong for me just not to ask you, where did you first actually see bonsai?
Crumbs. I first saw them in Hong Kong. I was probably 8.5, 9 years old. And in those days, we had a big house and servants and all that, being colonial, and our cook, the Chinese cook, she used to go to the markets, and every now and again, she'd drag me along with her, which was fun. I used to look at the goldfish and things like that. But there I didn't realize they were bonsai. I just saw these little trees in pots, and I thought, wow. And it was magical, just, never seen anything like it. No way did I know what they were or whether I could do it or where they'd come from or how they were done. I just was gobsmacked by these little dwarf trees. And that was it. End of. Never thought of it again after that.
That's nice. And so how did you, or when did you become interested in bonsai? Yeah.
Well, I became interested in bonsai really when I was at the art college as a lecturer. I was only about 24 or so at that time, just started teaching at the West of England College of Art. And one of my students on the day release course with Dave Claridge, he was only about 16 at the time, bless him. But we shared similar interests, okay? We were both very into wildlife and nature, and we both kept foreign finches, and he had some bonsai. And one of the garden centres, very near where I lived in Henleys, actually had a few bonsai. God knows where the heck they got them from, but he had a few. And that's where Dave got his bonsai from. And he always just do a pressure me, he says, "You got to start, sir," because I... So you got to get some. And this went on for weeks. It didn't happen. So in the end, in his frustration, he bought me a couple, a little semi-cascade wisteria, and a little zelkova, sweet little things. The wisteria was sort of semi-cascade, but the botch died, so I was a bit disappointed. So I just put it in a bigger pot, not a bonsai pot, and kept it as a garden tree and just ignored it for years and years and years and years, or should I say a couple of decades. And it's still alive. I sold it. It did actually eventually I suddenly saw, my God, this could be a good bonsai, and it did become a really nice bonsai, and I sold it to John Trott. Okay.
A bit further down the line.
A bit further down the line.
So back in those days, I guess you're talking late 60s, early 70s when you got involved with Dave?
Yeah, it was 60, 66, 66, 67, 68 with Dave, and then I actually had my first two trees that he bought me in 69.
And so, apart from Dave, did you know, or how soon was it before you got to know other people who were interested in the hobby?
At that time, it was just me and Dave. My nephew, Anthony, was quite interested. And he dragged along his cousin, another one of my nephews, Richard Barton. And the four of us, we would scour garden centres and things, But apart from that, you didn't really know anybody at that time.
Were there any societies at that time?
No, not to my knowledge. There may have been. I think there might have been the Bonsai Kai, all right, which was a splinter group of the Japan Society of London, which was based in London, and they did all sorts of things to do with Japan, and it was a very sort of high-end, typical sort of Chelsea type, that level Mayfair sort of thing. I think Princess Chichibu was their patron, or president, or something like that. I don't know, but anyway. Yeah, they had a little booklet, okay, for all their stuff, and just two of the A5 pages was just pretty simple little statements about bonsai, all right, from the Japanese perspective. And I had to join that society just for those 2 pages, because that's all that existed, to my knowledge.
And, and so, yeah, what were the actual trees like that you worked on then? You know, what was the quality of material?
Terrible. They were, I mean, by today's standards, they were the sort of rubbish that you just put straight in the bin, okay? They were mostly made from whatever you could get hold of, you know, that you might find in the garden, just self-seeded, self-seeded cotoneasters or conkers, any sort of stupid little thing. Birch trees were very popular because you get those seeding all over the place. And then we would go scouring nurseries, the 4 of us, you know, a gang of 4. Every blessed nursery within 50 miles range of Bristol, we would search for bonsai. And not for bonsai, but bonsai material, I should say, looking at the little conifers.
I believe you actually coined a phrase for...
Oh yes, if you had these things, you look at, that's a potential bonsai. So potential bonsai then became known as potensai. So potential, potensai. Some people are still using it, more fool them.
Hasn't made its way to the English dictionary yet.
Yeah, not quite, not in Wikipedia. Hey, there's nothing to stop you sending it to Wikipedia.
No, add it in.
Yeah, anybody can contribute to that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you've done a few things that you started, such as, I believe you started the Bristol Bonsai Society. Was that correct?
Yes, I was the originator of that, and then made contact with 1 or 2 other Bristol enthusiasts, and that comes back to your former question. There used to be a flower show on the Bristol Downs, and they had a guy who was exhibiting there under the name of, not exhibiting, he had a trade stand there under the name of Little Timber. He was from North Wales. It was pretty basic, to say the very least. I mean, he was having trees and things in jam jar lids and sweet jar lids and things, anything but bonsai pots. But it was magical. In those days, it was magical, brilliant. And you'd ask the questions, you know, do you know anybody interested in bonsai? And then somebody else might have been looking at the stand at the same time as you and say, oh, you interested? Oh, yeah. And, you know, anyway, Jan Birchall and Bill Birchall, her husband, they became involved with us. And then another guy called Martin Barker. So the 4 of us said, well, you know, why don't we start a club? Okay. Well, I said to them, why don't we start a club? And they said, yeah, good idea. So what we did is, the following year, when we had the show, we put a little notice out, and we asked Little Timber, could we leave it there? And it said something like, anybody interested in forming a bonsai society, you're very welcome to come and attend an inaugural meeting, okay, at such and such, on such and such. And about 18 people in total turned up, and that's how the Bristol Bonsai Society got its name. At one time it was Bristol Bonsai Society, and then it was the Bristol Bonsai Club. Oh, we couldn't have that, that's BBC. So you could have the BBS, Bristol, so, yeah. And then the BBA, Bristol Bonsai Association. Then we discovered that actually there was another society in London called the BBA, which was the Bonsai, the British Bonsai Association. Yeah. Anyway, okay, that's.
And when was that? I mean, what kind of period are we talking about?
Well, the society actually formed in 1975.
Right.
That was when the founding thing happened then, yeah.
And did you or did the society then become involved with other societies? I mean, how, because obviously you didn't have the internet then, so how did you all communicate?
Well, in the same way that I said, you know, through the dealers, there were a few dealers at the time in dealing in bonsai. There was Little Timber, there was Tokonoma with John Ainsley, there was Bromage Young with Val Young, and Norman Grisbit, yeah. I think there's Bushukan at that time as well, with Barry Lemon, although he might have come a bit later, and there's Sekuyan with Anne Swinton. There was another one up sort of North Wales, I think it was Warfield. And, you know, you went to these places and other people would be at these places. So that's how the community, the bonsai fraternity, as it, got together. You've got to remember there was nothing at that time by way of internet communications, social media, nothing. So it was all either by telephone or by letter, or by any events where you happened to be at the same place at the same time.
Presumably there weren't bonsai shows as such. Was there ever any kind of opportunity to display or to exhibit your show?
Yeah, there was. Yes, there was. We, the Bristol Flower Show again, we as a society had a stand there, a bonsai. God, how embarrassing. Actually, I still got some photographs of those pictures somewhere. I'm probably not keen to show them though. But these terrible little trees of ours, but we loved them, and that was important. I mean, you can't imagine the degree of pleasure and joy that we all had at that time for this little hobby of ours. No politics or any of that kind of stuff or bitching. It was just everybody helping everybody, at the same time. It was wonderful. But yes, we exhibited 2 or 3 times, or 4 times in fact, because we had 2 gold medals and 2 large golds, but no money prizes. We weren't allowed to qualify, and the traders made darn sure, they're not allowed to, okay, because they're not one of us. Because I believe there's a few bob attached to them, to an award. Okay.
Okay, so on a more personal note, how did your art background, how did that sort of impact and help you with your bonsai and bonsai design?
Well, it did, because you already had an inbuilt understanding of line, of form, of mass, of weight, of movement, and all these different things involved with the world of aesthetics. Okay, and you just adapted and applied these principles to your bonsai, to the creating of the trees. I was also very much a follower, if that's the right word, or respected nature and its natural forms, and tried as best I could to interpret what bonsai is. A tree in a tray, okay? Not something out of an injection mold in a tray. So I tried hard to make my bonsai look like living trees, okay? So I observed nature a lot. I'd go to arboretums like Western Burtons and such like, just studying trees and establishing in my mind, and this of course was the aesthetic background all coming into it, what was good in a tree, what was bad, the root buttresses, the sort of nature of the trunk, the tapers in the trunk, the formation of branches, and all this kind of thing, all these, and what you wanted to avoid and not include in your bonsai. And then of course all of this had to be simplified because your tree was never in scale. You'd never get the leaves to the same size as they should be. So at best you could only really do an icon, as it were, a living icon of a bonsai. Rather like a photograph is a 2-dimensional image of a tree. It's a flat image, but you can see it's a tree. So you create with your plant this form, and you can see, that looks like a tree. Very often today, particularly with bonsai, a lot of the bonsai don't actually look like trees. They're beautiful sculptures, living sculptures, but that's a different thing.
Interesting. So, okay, so you
very interesting.
You had a training in art and design and photography. You just said you would go and study the forms of the living trees and get an understanding of them. Bonsai for me is a marriage, if you like, between the artistic side and the horticultural side. Where did you learn your horticultural, or where did you get your horticultural knowledge from?
A lot of it is trial and error. Books, there's huge, whilst there wasn't much available by way of bonsai books or books on bonsai, although there were 3 or 4, I'll mention in a minute, there's any amount of stuff on gardening and trees. And there were lots of books, on trees and horticulture and the care of, and basically it's just applying really those same sort of horticultural practices and rules. One of the things though with bonsai is that it's essential that you have good drainage within the compost that you use. Okay, you wouldn't use normal garden soils and that kind of thing. You'd mix up your composts and you'd have a lot of grit and stuff in there, and you make sure that your pots had good sizable drainage holes, because by having that flow of water going through, it would drag down like a siphon the air, which is essential to the roots.
So, okay, hearing you say that, I'm going off script here slightly. I know in the past I've heard you say back in those days it was very much the blind leading the blind, and you wouldn't have had all that information readily to hand. So what experiments did you do with grits and things like that you were real disasters that you might have tried trial and error back in those days that you would never use now that you might have
right.
then?
Well, I could tell you one real disaster. I used to go down to on one of our local parks, Ashton Court, and there'd be molehills. Okay, so I'd go there and sneak in with a bag and a little shovel, and I'd collect the molehills. Okay, and then I'd come home and sieve it all out. And would you believe it? The fine stuff that came through the sieve was what I used to plant my trees in. I mean, if that wasn't ignorance plus, I don't know what is. Yeah, I couldn't have done anything worse. It's the stuff that was left in the thing that didn't fall through, the bigger stuff that I should have been using. But there we go. But incidentally, what I should have said was, at that time, I knew a guy called Peter Adams, because he also had a nursery in Farnham with his brother-in-law, Ian Price. So it was Price and Adams, okay, and their wife Sheila, and they had this place in Farnham. I used to go there quite a lot to help them at weekends and things. I loved it, and I learned a lot from Peter. Peter had a photographic memory. He's absolutely terrific. You know, you just read something and it was there forever. But his neighbour was a guy called Bill Archer, and he was a plant physiologist, and what he didn't know about that side of horticulture wasn't worth knowing. And of course, Peter, with his photographic memory, gleaned all the stuff from Bill.
And I believe his art background.
And he also had an art background, very much so. A tremendous draftsman. His drawings are something else. But yeah, I learned a heck of a lot from Peter, both by way of the horticulture of bonsai and as well as the aesthetics.
Okay, thank you. So I know you were involved with FoBBS in the early days. What was your involvement with them? Were you part of the
Well, I was just an ideas person as much as anything. It was a guy called Heron and his wife, dear old man. Anyway, he was the original brains, or guy who came up with the idea that an organisation, an association should be formed to coordinate the societies, not the individuals, but the societies. So FoBBS stands for the Federation of British Bonsai Societies, okay? So societies like the Bristol Bonsai Society, the West Midlands, the London societies, etc., all around the country, they could, if they wished to, pay their subscription and join the society and have the benefits that the society, that FoBBS offered. One of which was the thing that mostly attracted members, was the insurance coverage. You know, if you were having shows and things and there was an accident, you know, the FoBBS insurance would cover you. So, yeah, my involvement really on the committee was only for the first 2 or 3 years. I didn't have much involvement with FoBBS admin after that. It was mostly Kath Hughes and Malcolm Hughes.
What era, what time period were you looking at?
I'm sorry, I don't actually know, but that was really early days. You know, that must have been in the 70s at some point. Yeah, it was probably around the mid 70s.
And by that time, had many other
probably the late 70s.
Late 70s, okay. And were there many more societies springing up around the country then?
There were probably about 18 to 24 societies dotted around the country. I mean, when I started, there were very, very few. Very, 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 very
I
few.
remember a story you told me once about the Bristol Bonsai Society. You seem to have a huge number of members, but only a few coming to the meetings.
Right. The reason for that was that we had a journal, okay, Bonsai Journal, which was quite a good little A5 thing. Muggins was the editor of that and the brains behind it, and we'd all contribute our various experiences and any technical expertise or ideas or knowledge that we had apropos species or this or that or whatever went into that journal, and it was nicely illustrated, but it was the only publication, and we had corresponding members join the BBS, the Bristol Bonsai Society, from all over the country. In fact, even one or two from Europe, just for this blessed magazine. And it went on for years. And yeah, the production got better and better. From the original ones, which were printed using the good old dot matrix printers, where you could hardly see the text because it was just about half a dozen pixels. Until later, it became quite a sophisticated thing. And then a guy called Colin Lewis, nice chap, he's now in America, but he produced the Bonsai magazine, which was a British production, okay, and it was a nice glossy magazine, national, and of course then that became the thing that people all over the country subscribed to. So that was the end of our membership, and if we got 25, 30 to a meeting, that was good.
So obviously this was all before the internet and before people could freely find information. You were getting your information from these magazines and journals. Were there many books around on the subject at the time?
Well, when I first started, there were only 2 or 3 books. There was a book by Kan Yashiroda, a Japanese author, English translated book, nice, well-written, easy-reading book on bonsai. There was the Master's Book of Bonsai, which had some nice pictures in it. The technical information in there was a bit thin and pretty basic, but the one I liked really was Bonsai Miniature Trees and Stars. I think it was by Kyuzu Murata, but it's translated. It was the Methods of Kyuzu Murata by Lynn Perry. And if anybody wants a Bible, irrespective of any other books, that's the book to go for. If you can find one on Amazon or anywhere else, you'll be lucky. But that's the one to go for, the one by Lynn Perry.
We were talking the other day. You were mentioning that book and it being, your Bible. You too, I believe, wrote a book some years ago, back in the 80s, and looking at various very nice comments on your YouTube channel, I see people refer to your book as their Bible. But what were you thinking? Why did you decide to write that book?
I don't know why I decided to write it. It's just that I felt I had developed from A to probably to about B. Okay. And this needed to be put down because there weren't that many books around. Peter Adams had written 1 or 2, okay, and I thought, I just thought it'd be a nice idea, and it was literally written off the top of my head. I mean, none of that was gleaned from other books. It was all tested and tried methods. Everything that was in the book was stuff that I'd actually done and experienced, and all the photographs, the whole thing was mine. The only ones that weren't were a few illustrations of bugs and beetles and that sort of thing, but otherwise everything else was mine. And yeah, it's been printed several times, and it's had 2 or 3 translations into Spanish and Italian, I'm not sure, and the rights were recently resold, and I think it's come out again under a paperback. Not very keen on the cover, but there we go.
Okay.
And I have written another book. I hang my head down. I've written it, okay? The text is all there, and it's unique. It's totally, totally different from the first book. It's now more or less all concerned with aesthetics relating to bonsai, and there are some very unique sections in it that I like to think were my brainchild. 2 or 3 eureka moments where suddenly, the bulb burst, and I suddenly, my God. And these are in the book, and they're unique. The only trouble is, I doubt if it'll ever be published because I just can't get around to sorting out all of the illustrations, the photographs and things for it. It was going to be a very, very visual book. And I've been working on it. I had worked on this thing for over 25 years, okay? And I'm just tired now. I'm very, very, very tired. We might have snippets of it in the YouTube videos, and we're talking about the possibilities of doing some chalk and talk. Well, I shouldn't say chalk and talk because it's actually whiteboard and talk things, extracts from the book which I can explain, so that but as I said, the manuscript is written. Yeah, and I'm getting so much flack from so many quarters to, for God's sake, get on with it,
Never say never.
Yeah, right.
Watch this space. We'll see what happens there. Well, okay, going back to basics. We have Dave Claridge to thank or to blame for your involvement with bonsai. I know Peter Adams was a huge influence on you, but when you were sort of really starting to get into it more seriously, who were you hanging around with? Who were you doing stuff with? Who were your influences?
Everybody. One of the things, as an educationalist myself, being involved, with the Bristol Polytechnic, which is now the UE, the University of the West of England, I've always said it's not for me to teach. Okay, that's just telling you this, that, and the other. I don't want to tell you things. But I'll bend over backwards to help you to learn. And that's something worth thinking about, the difference. And so what was this leading to? What was your question?
Who did you used to hang around with them? Who inspired you?
Well, people like Peter Adams, and of course the Japanese names were coming to mind now, and I'm not quite sure about the actual chronology of it all, but this guy in Japan, Nakamura-san, okay, just a genius. He completely turned bonsai upside down, particularly from the technical side of things, where he was achieving results from mind-blowing processes that he had conceived and innovated and doing. He was my god. I did actually get to meet him several times subsequently, got on very well with him. But yeah, he did some remarkable work, and he was one. But within this country, obviously there's Peter Adams, there's Bill Jordan, Marion Milnes, Dave Joyce. Dave Joyce is one of the loveliest people on this planet. So sadly he died shortly after he took retirement. Broke my heart, that did, but yeah, he was a lovely guy. And of course several people within our Bristol Bonsai Society, Ron Hayward and many others, that come to my Vince house.
How did Bristol Bonsai Society sort of rate amongst the societies in the country?
We were lucky in having quite a lot of reasonably talented bonsai artists, in inverted commas, people who could actually produce something that half looked like a tree in a pot, and we were held in very high esteem.
When were you first invited to demo bonsai? Who asked you?
The very first invitation I had to do a demo in front of an audience was up in Yorkshire. okay, by a darling guy, lovely little chappie, called Mike Kennett, and he got his society together, and I had to do a little workshop or something for them, and that was the very, very first time. But shortly after that, the Scottish Bonsai Association, the SBA, invited me up to Scotland to do something up there. And then we had, back in 1983, some events organised by FoBBS, and they invited John Naka from America. John Naka was, at that time, the #1 in Western world bonsai. He was from the West Coast, from California, in the sort of east side of the States, was Yoshimura-san, okay? Whereas John was very flamboyant, very open, and a terrific guy. He came here to visit once. Yoshimura was totally different. He was very formal, very traditional, very you do it this way sort of thing, There's no flexibility there, all right? Anyway, that's beside the point. I'm drifting and I don't know what I was talking about now.
When you were asked to...
Oh yeah, and then John Naka, after that time when we had him over here, where he did a demo in Scotland, in Manchester, in London and in Bristol, and I was privileged to help him, to assist him in the Bristol one, and he might have been impressed, I don't know, but anyway, it was enough for him to invite me over to the Golden States convention, which was being held at that time in Palm Springs. Incredible. I was nervous as hell, but it was incredible. I had a really good time over there, and they were very friendly people, and the material that I was given was huge by British standards, all right? It was a vast, big Californian juniper, something that went up like that, and then a big thing sticking out there. I had to carve this thing. So a guy called Dan Robinson, okay, who was really the chappie who started the whole business of carving with power tools, passed me up an electric chainsaw and also a Makita die grinder. The American die grinder is much bigger than the ones that we have over here. Anyways, I used that, all right? And there was a Doris Froning who was doing a demo on the table beside me, and she was working on Mame bonsai, okay? Here I am, cutting off chunks of this blooming tree, which were bigger than her finished specimens. And that was terrific. I had a wonderful time over there. And then I did a second tree as well, which was Juniperus prostrata, which is a species that we never seem to use in this country, but my God, it's a terrifically popular species over there and develops sizable trunks very, very quickly. But yeah, that was the first of, I think I went over to the States on different occasions over the years, 13 times, mostly to Florida. And yes, in California, and also up to Portland, and yeah.
Were you ever asked, I appreciate exhibitions and things were happening as time went on. Did you ever get involved with the judging of anything yourself, or did you purely exhibit?
Sadly, they use that word, judging. I hate it myself. Judging is being judgmental. I prefer to say assessing, But yes, judging. I was involved quite a lot at club level around various exhibitions and things. But on many occasions, probably a couple of dozen times, over Chelsea and other RHS shows around the country, and as the bonsai representative within the judging panel, which would be the floral panel, and they were usually responsible for something like 24 to 30 different exhibitors, which might have all sorts of different flowers and different types of things, okay, and then bonsai. Yeah, And what I said went, none of them dared challenge it.
Did you ever win any awards for your trees?
Yes, here and there. I had recognition in Japan on 3 occasions. Okay, there was this exhibition convention type thing called the International Bonsai and Suiseki exhibition, and that was held in Osaka. Okay, in Japan, and they invited entries from around the world, photographic entries from around the world. You send your little 35mm slide and they'd blow them up into big photographs, and these are all around the exhibition. And my dancing crane, Hawthorne, took the top award out of 300 entries, which I was very chuffed by, obviously. The dancing crane being a collected Hawthorne from the Welsh mountains, and John Naka translated dancing crane for me into Japanese. He said its Japanese name would be Suro no Mai. So I said, yeah, okay, I didn't challenge it. He wrote it down for me.
And for the timeline, what sort of period were we talking about then?
Oh, golly, I can't remember.
Are we still back in the 70s, or would we have been into the 80s?
Oh, no, it's been into the 80s now, yeah. Yeah, it must have been, because John came over in 83. Yes, so this sort of happened in the early 80s, yeah.
Okay, I know you used to write for the the Bristol Bonsai Society Journal, and you wrote your own book. Did you ever do writing for any other publications at all?
Yeah, I did an awful lot of articles for the British Bonsai magazine, but then it was sold over to René Flaren Bloch and René, I don't know René's surname, over in Holland, and they produced bonsai publication over there. And I wrote numerous articles for them and supplied, the photos or illustrations as well. And many things. Every month, every bi-month, I think it was, bi-monthly, 6 a year, I would contribute. But then I got a bit miffed because, spending a lot of time doing some, I don't mind saying, rather nice pencil drawings and things, and then having them published in the magazine, sort of postage stamp size, I thought, nah, I'm not going to bother with this anymore. So I said, that's it, enough's enough. But I did also write for a Spanish magazine, a guy called Penalba, can't remember it. Jorge Penalba, yeah.
Okay.
George Penalba.
All right. Were you involved with any of the national bonsai events and exhibitions, conventions, etc.?
Yeah.
Were there many?
Yes, all over the country. Bonsai societies were they're holding their own sort of society exhibitions all over. And we had ours every year, our Bristol Bonsai Society, we would have one, and it was a very, very well produced and acclaimed, exhibition of excellence. And it wasn't just confined to our members. We also always had, always invited a few from outside, other societies to come and exhibit as well. And we'd have traders there. Sometimes we might have somebody doing a demo at the same time. So I was very much involved in that. I was involved in many, many other things, not necessarily what you've just said, but the Joy of Bonsai was my brainchild, and that was quite a major event. What it was I felt, I'd had a damn good innings up until that point. This was now into the 90s, the mid-90s. In fact, I can actually be specific. The first Joy of Bonsai was 1996. And the idea was to have the Magnificent Seven. So we were 7 demonstrators for the 2 days working on a project of their own choice. It could be working on a tree or whatever, but it had to be for the whole duration of the 2 days. And we were in a central forum, okay? And then we also had a supporting exhibition all round us in this huge venue in Bath, and that they in turn were surrounded by the traders. So it was a very big, major promotion, okay? And what I did is I got these guys who were bonsai names, well-known bonsai people from all over. I mean, I've had them from many from this country. I had them from Europe. I even had them over from America. They were all paid a nominal fee, something like £250. In fact, one guy was from Bath. He got his £250. And in that same particular Joy of Bonsai event, there were two guys from America, and they each had £250. They had to cover everything else themselves, you know. But they found other ways to to supplement their expenses. And that always went down very, very well. And we had, over the years, we had about half a dozen or so Joy of Bonsais, yeah. And that was all my thing. Funnily enough, I've still got the documentation on so many of the Joy of Bonsai events, all the posters and all the flyers and all the things and all the traders and all that kind of stuff. But everything and anything that was happening in this country, all the traders, anybody selling stuff would be there. And it was a terrific, everybody always said it was probably the best thing of its kind in the country. And so many people have said, why can't we get it back, you know?
Did you get much interest from the general public as well as the
Yes,
fraternity?
yes, yeah, we did. Mm.
So how was your personal involvement with the European side of things? How did that develop and come about? And when did it?
I suppose a lot of it, because of the articles that I'd written, I suppose people saw those other societies around Europe, you know, and they thought, well, let's get this guy over. I can even remember there's I said about FoBBS, okay, being the central thing for the clubs of the UK. Well, there was also ABBA, which was the European Bonsai Association, and they were responsible for the societies, or for the sort of FoB equivalents of the different countries in Europe, okay? So Switzerland, Germany, France, Belgium, all these in Poland, they all were represented, and they all had membership within ABBA, okay? So ABBA always had its annual big convention, and big convention, and I'd been invited over there, and I can even remember once, now that this is when it starts getting a bit bigger, when I can remember the organizer, well, ABBA wouldn't be ABBA without you. You know, you've got to come, Dan. And then they would introduce me to, this is a Dan Barton. It was, Dan Barton. In America, with John Narca introducing me to over there, it was different. It was this is a Dan Barton. He's a half English. He's a half Chinese, and he's a half Japanese. Very funny. God, he was a card, that guy.
So you were still, or mid-80s, late 80s, you were still working at the art college. And
yeah,
I believe you
loved it. I loved it.
And you took early retirement, basically, as I recall, at the age of 50.
Yes. That was exceptional. Okay, early retirement was normally 55, but educational funding was very bad, so they brought it forward to get rid of a lot of their teachers.
It did provide you with a huge new opportunity and enabled you to open some big doors in your life.
Oh God, yes.
Which
absolutely.
I remember changed at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I did do one or two. I mean, that first thing over to America, to Palm Springs, I actually had to ask my head of department, which was not this one, the one I don't like, it was the previous one. And they saw it as a prestigious thing for the department to have one of their staff go over, an international lecturer.
But it did present you with a new...
Because I could then... I had the freedom of movement. I actually thought, I'd be going back to college, on a part-time basis for a couple of days. It never happened. I got so many very kind invites to demonstrate all over the country, different societies, holding workshops or doing a lecture, doing masterclass and all sorts of things. And here I was able to do what was sort of residential courses, okay, where I'd have people, I'd only ever have 2 at a time, and they would come for 6 days, all right, and I build it as a university level. It was a high level course in bonsai, and it was sort of 60% chalk and talk, very academic aspect of the aesthetics. Much of the content of my book now, second book, and 40% hands-on. We also had a field day where we would go to Western Burt or some part like that and study trees, and I would discuss what we talked about earlier.
And I'm guessing a lot of things just fell into the melting pot at the right time, really. You had the artistic training background, you had the horticultural knowledge by now, you had a reputation by now. As an educationalist, you knew how to put a course together, importantly, so you were able to develop a lot of training courses.
Yeah, I suppose I was very lucky, very, very lucky, because it wasn't just a question of a talent in one thing. There were so many different things, there was authorship, the writings, okay? I did the poetry, I did the photography, and then did these other things that you just mentioned. And all these different things all contributed in their way to make whatever it was that I was doing, the net product, quite a well put together event. I'm grateful to whoever it was that gave me these talents.
I remember reading somewhere that you conducted over 500 courses or workshops.
No, just programs, all different things, workshops, lectures, demonstrations, all sorts of things. But that wouldn't just that be within this country, that would be within our society, and other societies, and to individuals. A lot of one-to-ones I used to do in those days. I also used to do a lot of helping at bonsai nurseries. I'd go to Herons, okay. I went there for nearly 10 years, on and off. I'd spend time there working on Peter Chan's trees. But I had these residential courses, and they attracted people from all over the world. We got them from America, from Switzerland, from Portugal, most of the continental countries, from all over this country, 2 at a time. And it was extremely well received. And they were always fun. And we had some lovely, lovely people. And to this day, even yesterday, I had an email from one of my, not an email, a Facebook posting from one of my Swedish participants. Yes, they were fantastic. I could tell you some really...
you've had a very good social life through bonsai, haven't you? It's gone way beyond the trees.
Bonsai has been an incredible enabler. It's enabled me to see so many different parts of the world, which I would never, ever have been able to see because I couldn't afford it. Mortgage and 4 kids, and you were one of them. No chance. I can remember just a round of ice creams for the 4 of you was crippling when we used to go on holiday. But I saw an awful lot, and of course it's very humbling. But they looked after you so well, and they gave you such respect.
You took early retirement, and and you were able to travel and create workshops, etc. It also gave you much more time to work on something we haven't discussed yet. We've been talking about the trees, but the pot side of things. You got a kiln at home, and you were able to start making pots. Okay,
how it started was as my own personal collection started growing in numbers. I couldn't afford pots. I just simply couldn't afford pots. Pots are expensive things, okay? And, excuse me, I used to use the tops of these big, tall sweet jars and things like that, drill a couple of holes in them and there. I'd even use things like yogurt, couldn't use yogurt containers, they didn't have yogurt in those days in this country, ice cream cartons and anything you can get your hands on. Spode ovenware, drill a couple of 1/4-inch holes, and then I thought, well, I knew this adult art course down at one of our local colleges in the evenings, and I went along to their pottery department, signed on, and I was there for many years. Not so much, but really to use their facilities, because at that time I didn't have a kiln, okay, and and I was particularly interested in the gas kilns, okay, and the reduction glazes effects that you would get from reduction firings. And yeah, that's how it started. I was making a few pots, and eventually, people said, other bonsai people, you ever thought of making a few to sell on? Because, I wouldn't mind one of your pots. And that's how it started. And it's just gone on and on and on. And now the pots, we've made thousands of pots, and they've gone all over the world, and I'm still getting commissions to this day.
I always think of bonsai, of the pots as being something relatively new, which of course it's not. You've been doing them for over 40 years, haven't you?
Yes, yeah,
It's a long time.
yes.
I know when you were at Bristol, one of the ceramic students there is also now very prominent in the bonsai.
When I was lecturing in photography, we always had, for all the other different disciplines within the faculties within the college, they always had to send their students to us for their 2-week block of photography, okay, of which the ceramics department sent theirs. And one of the guys was Gordon Duffett, okay, fine. So I'm tutor, he's student. Anyway, several years later, at this sort of this art college place that I used to go to get at the gas kilns, who should turn up in the new academic year? Gordon Duffett. And this time, he's the tutor and I'm the student. No problem. And he saw me making a pot. And he said, that's a bonsai pot. I said, yeah. And he said, I didn't know you were interested in bonsai. I said, what, Gordon? I've been doing it for years. You were at college, you didn't know? Everybody knows. No, he didn't know. And he said, I do a few. Very humble, sort of quiet guy. I said, I'd love to see them. So he brought them round to our place, our former home, and I was well impressed, okay? And I was also very impressed with the trees that he had in them. They were collected yew trees that he got from somewhere up near Anglesey, North Wales. And I said, you ever thought of making a few? And, what? No way. He just wouldn't entertain the idea. It was far too sort of bemeaning, as it were, to sell ceramics with holes in them. Anyway, I said, right, Gordon, I'll sell your pots for you, and I'll sell them to people I know would appreciate them, okay? So eventually I twisted his arm and got him to make a few pots, and they went like that. So that encouraged him to make a few more. It was tough, and they were fantastic. Those early pots had totally different glazes to the pots that he makes these days. The range of glazed colours was quite different, and the range of shapes was very different. Gordon has developed bonsai pot ceramics to a level that frankly is unmatched. I'll just say in UK, I'll say in Europe, and I don't know anybody else in the Western world that can do better pots than bonsai pots, okay? It's fantastic. His glazes are delicious, to say the least, And
I believe you also got your wife involved.
Yeah, she makes nice little pots. She makes some of these action pots. We call them flying saucers. Yeah, you can see these on our websites and things. Do take a peep sometime. It's not just YouTube. There are the websites as well.
So you're not planning to hang up your bonsai shears and your pottery tools just yet, then?
It depends on these, okay? Sadly, I'm getting a lot of arthritis now in the hands, and this September, a couple of months' time, I'll be 85. Okay, I don't feel 85 up here, but I feel it throughout here. Okay, up here I'm about 14. Yeah, so they've been good years, great years.
Hopefully a lot more to come. But I'd like to talk to you more about the ceramic side of things, but let's save that for a different conversation.